about Sunday evening services, the lessons, and I asked, I said, what are some ideas that you think would help the Christians that are here on Sunday nights? And they said, well, let's do some basic lessons. And I want to do that. And of course, I realize these are most of these lessons we're going to be doing are things that you're aware of. But number one, it's always good to be reminded of them. And number two, if we are doing our Christian duty, we're going to be asked questions about these very things. Why we believe what we believe. Why don't we have instruments of music? Why don't we have women preaching? Why don't we have, and so these are questions we're going to be doing. So for the next few weeks, and I value your ideas. If there's something that comes up in your mind, says, hey, Sam ought to do this or cover this topic, certainly share that with me. But tonight I want to begin with what we might say is the COVID aftermath. And I didn't preach this for Althea and Mark. They are definitely in COVID aftermath. But look around, not just at the Brighton Church of Christ, but at some of the denominations in Brighton. Look at other churches of the Lord throughout the state of Colorado or throughout the United States or even in other parts of the world. The church in a lot of ways has been decimated. Every time I use that word, my son would always say, Dad, that only means that you're reducing it by 1/10. And I understand that technically that's what decimated means, but I'm using it more in the colloquial way that it has been reduced to a great degree. We would normally have on our board over here about 120 to 130 pre-COVID. And now after COVID, we're 80 to 85. If we hit 90 on a Sunday morning, we're doing really well. That's just where we are. And I realize some of that is people moving away. Some of that cannot be helped. Some of that is people leaving for reasons other than COVID. Some of that is people just not returning after COVID. And so the question is what can we do as Christians, as members of the church here at Brighton, what can we do? What responsibility maybe do we have in helping the church in the aftermath of COVID? One thing that I hear a lot, and I've heard it from people here and I've heard it in other places, that, it's just discouraging. Discouraging. I've heard it multiple times just looking at a Sunday night crowd. We say, our Sunday nights, we're doing, 20 to 30 on a Sunday night most times. You say, well, that's discouraging. Well, in the COVID aftermath, let me suggest that we quit saying that things are discouraging. Am I happy that we're in lower numbers? Well, maybe not happy, but instead of being discouraged by it, let's look at it as an opportunity. As an opportunity to get some things right. I want to use for tonight for our scriptures, John chapter 4 and verse 35, and we'll just keep coming back to this one verse. This is not a real deep lesson or anything like that, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be an encouraging one, to talk about the power that we each have in our own hands because our hands work for God. It's not because of what I'm able to do, but it's because of what I allow God to do through my works, through my hands, through my heart, through my head. And so Jesus, of course, this is at the end of the discussion of his discussion with the woman from Samaria at the well, the Samaritan woman. And you'll recall that he's been discussing with her. She's got some questions. She perceives that he's a pretty smart man at one point. Says, I perceive that you're a prophet. Maybe you can settle the old argument between the Jews and the Samaritans. Our fathers say that we're to worship in this mountain, Mount Gerizim. Your fathers say we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem or the Mount Moriah. Which one is it? And of course, Jesus tells her, that we worship what we know. You worship what you don't know. Salvation is from the Jews. And of course, she's like, well, when the Messiah comes, he'll answer this question if you're not going to. Of course, what she doesn't understand is this is the Messiah, and he tells her that. But the disciples had gone away, it says, to go into the town of Sychar, in order to buy provisions. And they're now returning. Now, what's interesting is Sychar and this well that is outside the town of Sychar, they're visible from one another. Some say that it may have been even possible for his disciples, while they're in the agora or the marketplace, to look upon the hill and see the well at Sychar and see Jesus talking to a strange woman at the well. Maybe it is within sight distance, but it doesn't matter. They're finally coming back, and they're curious about what Jesus has done and what Jesus is doing in this particular time. And they ask him about it, and of course he tells them, that I have food that you don't understand. And they're like, well, why'd you send us down to the town if you've already got food? But it wasn't talking about physical food. He's talking about a meat which God has given to him, a sustenance, a way that God sustains his own life. But in verse 35, Jesus says, do not say, or some translations, ESV has it, do you not say, and puts it as a question. But I think Jesus is saying, do not say there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest. Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. And what's interesting is, remember one of the last things he told the woman was to go and get your husband, and there's that discussion there, and she leaves and she goes into the town and she tells the people, come see this man. He knows everything there is to know about me. He knows my deepest, darkest secrets, the things that I try to keep hidden from you. He knows. Come and see him. And so imagine the town, they are whipped up into a fervor, we might say, and they're following, and they go out to see Jesus. And it's around this time, as the townspeople are coming up the hill toward the well, that Jesus says, look, lift up your eyes. The fields are white unto harvest. And I can almost see him sweeping his arm toward the approaching crowds. Look, they're here. They're ready for you. All you have to do is do the work I'm sending you out to do. In my mind, that's the picture that the words paint for me. Maybe it's not exactly accurate as far as what exactly happened. The details that we don't know are details that are not revealed to us. But what we do know is that the people are coming, and Jesus says the fields right now are ready for harvest. I want to give you 3 ideas from this passage. And the first one is, be happy. Don't be discouraged by what the church looks like in the aftermath of COVID. And I think that kind of, goes along with this idea that he has here when he says, do not say there are 4 months yet to the harvest. Don't be discouraged and think, well, we can't do it now. There's still 4 months left, or now's not the right time. I don't think that the disciples were holding off and saying, well, in 4 months, then we'll get busy. I think the point is Jesus is saying there's a time for you to start harvesting, and it's right now. But what often happens is that we as Christians, we look at the time, we read the tea leaves, we look at the signs, we read everything, we say, now is not the time. Maybe the disciples are thinking in their minds, we're still with Jesus, we'll get busy whenever Jesus leaves. Or maybe they think, well, we're not quite ready yet. There's still training that we desire to have before we feel adequate enough to go out and be his representatives or his ambassadors to the communities. I think sometimes we as Christians today, even though we're not standing in the very presence of Jesus, we still struggle for when is the right time to make a move, right? I don't know enough evangelism, we might say, and so I'm not quite ready to do that. Or we look at the situation and we say that the time's not right for me now, in full anticipation that one day we'll get busy. And when one day comes or sometime comes, it really never comes. You think about pitchers in baseball when they're throwing the ball and they're throwing pretty close to strikes, and a batter standing up there and he's watching it go by and he's watching it go by and he's watching it go by. And he finally strikes out, and you just want to say to the batter, what are you waiting on? Are you waiting for one that is just right in the middle of the strike zone that you are perfect? Because if you're waiting on that pitch, you will never swing and you will never get a hit. Look, we cannot afford as Christians to wait for the perfect moment? When's the perfect time to talk to my neighbor? When is the perfect time to talk to my mother or my father or my cousins or aunts or uncles, whoever it might be? When is the perfect time? And if we're waiting on the perfect time, it'll never get done. So instead of being discouraged and think, well, now's not the right time, or now I'm not ready for it, be happy that we have now, and you use that. I think that's Jesus' point, is don't wait until everything's just right. Rather, seize this moment. There are 4 days for the harvest. He says it doesn't matter when the harvest is, the real harvest, the harvest that you need to be concerned about, it's ready right now. And unlike the crop harvest, that you have to plow the field and prepare the soil, and then plant the seed, and then tend the seed until the plants come, and pull the weeds and wait for the harvest. And the harvest is only at a short time, a short season of the year, and then the rest of the year you got nothing to do. He says, look, the harvest of souls is always ripe. There's never a time that there are not souls ready to be saved. Now, where are those souls? Are they your next door neighbor? I don't know. They might be. Maybe it's the people across the street, down the road. Maybe it's someone you work with, or they work in the same office just down the hall. Maybe it's people you go to school with. I don't know. What I do know is that those are the very ones you've got to mine for curiosity. You've got to look to those people for the opportunity. And what's the worst they can do? That's always the question. What's the worst they can do? Take away your birthday? They can't do that. The worst they can do is say no. And of course, in sales, no means what? Not right now. And so in a few months, you may have an opportunity. The window opens, or something happens in their lives, and now's the time that you strike while the iron is hot. But the whole idea is that these are the very ones. So be happy for the opportunities that we have. Number two is to be watchful. I like what Jesus says when he says to them. He says, look, lift up your eyes and see. I think a lot of times what we're looking for, maybe not just the perfect time, but the perfect circumstance, or the perfect candidate, or perfect prospect for evangelism. And maybe we've got our eyes set on Aunt Millie, right? And we're waiting for something to happen in Aunt Millie's life that she's interested in the gospel. And we're so focused on Aunt Millie that we don't see all the other opportunities around us. And I think in this case, the disciples, they're looking for Jews whose hearts are ready to be converted, right? And there's this entire crowd of people that are Samaritans that are coming up the hill to hear Jesus, and Jesus is saying, look, the fields are ripe. They're ready to be harvested. See what I see. And I think that's the challenge to us, to see what Jesus sees, to see it in a way that he sees it. And so when we think about the church in times of the aftermath of COVID and how it's been somewhat decimated, we look at the church and we have to say that we're in a rebuilding process, right? We use that in football a lot. We talk about football teams. They're in a rebuilding process. That means they're going to lose more games than win. While they're trying to get the right personnel in place, they're rebuilding. Well, listen, we are rebuilding. Really, essentially, the church is always rebuilding. But especially when we think about in the aftermath of COVID, we are rebuilding. And I think one of the worst things that we can do as Christians is fret over those who are not here anymore. Now, that may seem callous to you. I mean, still pray for them. We want them to come back, yes. But let's quit fretting over those who are gone and determine to grow the church by bringing new people in. That's how the church grows. And listen, here's the amazing thing is by doing that to me is some of the best evangelism for those who have fallen away. To borrow the slogan let's make church great again, right? Let's make the church something that people want to be a part of. And what do people like? They like success. And for those who are maybe they're waiting for the perfect pitch to come back, maybe they're waiting for that just the right instance, I don't know. But when a church is growing and active and vibrant, everyone wants to be a part of it. And if we're wringing our hands all the time over all of those who are gone, our eyes are not lifted up and looking to the harvest fields. We're all looking inward, and we're fretting over those who have gone. And so let me suggest that we quit fretting over those who are not here and make church great again. How do we do that? Well, part of that's just talk it up among your friends and your relatives and your coworkers. You know, when you go to work, you know, if someone asks what you did this weekend, don't start with, we baled hay on Saturday afternoon, and then we had a cookout on Saturday night. Don't start with that. Start with, Sunday I got to go worship God. And, I'd like to think that every once in a while I say in the sermon something worth repeating. And if there's something worth repeating, repeat it. Those of you who use Twitter, you don't Twitter it out, you tweet it out, I guess. If you're on social media, Facebook, say something about it. It's one thing to share religious memes and Bible verses and stuff like that, but anyone can do that. Do you know who can quote Ivan Stewart from a Bible class or quote me from a sermon? Those who are here. And if other people want to get excited about those things, where can they go to get that kind of information? They can come here. So that's the idea. And so maybe you have Instagram or whatever. If you social media at all, share it. That's this whole week since Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, my social media feed has been eat up with quotes from the Bear Valley Lectures. The preachers up there, it's Wayne Jones, it's Wayne Berger, it's Dan Owens, or whoever they've got as a speaker in this particular moment, and they've said something that was interesting to someone, and they posted it on their Facebook, and it went out. We need to be able to do that. Talk it up at work. Talk it up on social media. Live it in your life. That's how we're going to make church great again. If we're silent about all of these things, if they can't motivate us to say something about the church at Brighton, not just religion in general, not just the Bible in general, but the church at Brighton. That's how we're going to connect with people, is through the church at Brighton. And it needs to be specific to the church at Brighton. And then I would say in this idea of be watchful is to exemplify growth, not disappointment. Be the person, be the cheerleader for the church that says we can do this. If it's just me or just the elders, we're not going to all buy into it. We need to buy into the potential that we have. And when we're buying into that, when we understand that this is possible, not just possible, this is probable in our lives, then we can do so much more. And when we are just disappointed all the time, which of our coworkers want to come to a church that you're disappointed in? What schoolmate wants to come to class with you or come to worship with you when you're discouraged with the church? Now, I realize some bad things have happened, but that doesn't mean we have to have bad attitudes or negative attitudes about it. We can still have positive attitudes on what we can do in the aftermath of COVID. And then finally, the last thing is be prepared. Why? Well, because he says the fields are white for harvest. They're ready. You may not think you're ready, but the souls are ready. Listen, one of the things that COVID has done, among all the other things that it has done in our world, it has changed a lot of people's attitude about their mortality. It doesn't take much for any one of us to die. And a lot of people are now more apt to listen to the gospel than ever before. And so we need to be prepared. Be prepared to talk to people about the gospel. And that brings us up to kind of the idea of this series is what's in your toolbox. What do you have in your back pocket? You know, that's one thing they tell you about preachers is, you know, when you go visiting other places, always be ready to preach. Because you never know when you get there, someone says, hey, we're sure glad you're here. Brother so-and-so is out of town and or got sick this morning and he's not ready. Any way you could fill in for us? I have visited in places and ended up preaching more times than not preaching. Why? And what do? Well, I used to carry a little ASV New Testament, and I put one of those library card holders, you know, it's in the back of the book of the library. They may not do that anymore. Now they have barcodes and stuff. Some of you kids don't even know what I'm talking about. But it used to be that there was a card back there, and you pulled it out, and you signed your name on it, and they put a date on it. And that's when you had to return the library book back, you know, and then it also told, you know, who all had checked out this book, you know, it was a wonderful thing. Well, I got a hold of one of those library envelopes for the back of the book, and I stuck it in that little NIV, or not NIV, New Testament, it was ASV New Testament, and I had like 7 or 8 sermons, my go-to sermons, you know, and I wrote them out real small on an index card. And I kept them in that pocket. And if someone had asked if I went and visited somewhere and they say, hey, would you mind doing a lesson for us? Well, you know, I've got like 8 lessons here. I'm like, yeah, it's not a problem. They weren't technically in my back pocket. They were in the back pocket of my Bible. But still, the idea is that you need to be ready. And as Christians, maybe you're not called upon to preach much, but you're going to be asked questions. And do you have a study? If you're talking to someone and they say, you know, my father died last week, and we had his funeral, and it's really been tough ever since then. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? Are you ready? Because, brethren, that's an opening right there. Man, I'm sorry you lost your dad. What kind of person was he? Have them talking about their dad. Oh, he was this, and that, and the other. So he left a pretty good impact on your life. Yeah. Are you going to see him again? I don't know. Well, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. Or, man, I sure hope so. I love my dad. What are you going to say? What's in your back pocket? What's in your toolbox, right? What can you do to help this particular situation? I mean, we're talking about evangelism, and we need to have some studies in our back pocket. And so in the coming weeks, that's kind of what we're doing. We're going to pull out a hammer and a wrench and a screwdriver and a saw and maybe even a joiner. I don't know what all it's going to be, but we're going to pull out some tools that you can have in your toolbox and things that are you know, hopefully simple. And maybe you can just sit down with someone and talk to them about the gospel. Because look, when they're telling you about, you know, their mom or their dad has passed away and they've had the funeral and they've had a rough time, you can't really call me up and say, hey, Sam, I've got someone here who's ripe for the picking. This is time for you to strike while that iron is hot. And you can do it. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And so we're doing that, and listen, this is why we're doing it. It's to save the church. You know, good teams, they say, don't stay the same from week to week. They either get better or they get worse. And the same is true of a church. A church that seeks to maintain its membership is already dying, period. If we're just seeking to maintain what we have, we're already dying. We want a living mentality. We want a living heart that says we're going out and we're going to save other people. We're going to bring other people to know Christ. And so we're going to talk about such things as, how do I start a conversation with someone about the gospel? Or what's I've got one shot. Maybe I'm on a bus ride or an airplane ride, and the person next to me seems to be religious, and they're asking me questions about what I believe, and I've got one opportunity in this study. What do I want them to know before they get off the plane or get off the bus? What can I tell them in that amount of time? A simple study, and I give you a look as I do evangelism. One of the things I try to do is evaluate the person. Where are they? What motivates them? Look, I've heard people say, we shouldn't be motivated by fear to obey God. We should be motivated by God's love. Well, guess what? Some people are more motivated by fear than they are by love. And others are more motivated by the love than they are the fear. Some are motivated by the reward of heaven. Some are motivated by the terror of hell. The fact is, we're all motivated by different aspects of the same Word of God. Ask yourself, what's my favorite story in the Bible? And then ask your neighbor that's sitting next to you, what's their favorite? Do you think it's the exact same one? No, it's probably different. Do you know why it's different? You've ever asked yourself, why do people look at one story and are really, really touched by this one, and someone else like, yeah, that's a good one, but have you read this one over here? Why is that? It's because we're different people. We're at different places in our lives. Maybe your answer, what's your favorite story? It depends on what day of the week it is. It depends on what's going on. Are you asking little boy Sam? Or are you asking teenager Sam? Or are you asking adult Sam? Are you asking adult Sam at the beginning of his ministry or adult Sam after 30 years of ministry? Look, those stories change because who we are changes throughout our lives. And so it's good to be able to evaluate someone and see where they are in their lives and see what's touching them, what's motivating them, what has brought them to a desire to study. And then, instead of just having a hammer in your toolbox, maybe you've got a hammer, a wrench, and a screwdriver, all of them. And you can say, you know what, in this situation, it's going to take the screwdriver. Or in this situation, it's going to take the hammer. I've met some people in evangelism, and they need a hammer. Knock them over the head with it. But some simple studies. And then also, I want to put in your toolbox some answers to common questions. And this may be where you can help me out. You can say, hey, Sam, I once talked to this person. They asked me this question, and I answered it, or I didn't have an answer for it, or how would you have answered it? And so I want to load in your toolbox tools that you can actually use. So that's what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we're going to be praying about lifting up our eyes and being able to see what God sees. See those who need the gospel. Maybe that's you tonight. Maybe you need the gospel and you need to obey the gospel. That might be you. But maybe you've already obeyed the gospel and you're seeing yourself in a way that you realize, I've fallen short. Or maybe I've just grown weak. Or maybe I'm just a little discouraged right now and I need the encouragement of the church. There's so much that the body of Christ here at Brighton, the church here at Brighton can do for you, to encourage you and to strengthen you, to walk with you, to hold you up when you're limping, to encourage you and cheer you when you're prospering and doing well. But we don't know everything that you need, but if you'll make that need known to us tonight while we stand and sing, we will accommodate as much as we can.